I'm Cherie Harder, the president of the Trinity Forum, and my guest today is Dana Gioia, the former chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts and current Poet Laureate of California. Dana is going to be our guest tonight at our evening conversation, speaking on why poetry matters. And we've invited him to the office today to ask a few lightning round questions. So, Dana, in a nutshell, why does poetry matter?
Poetry is our most concise, expressive, and memorable way of using words to describe our experience. So as long as we use language, poetry is our most powerful tool to communicate. People that know poetry, I think, will always have an advantage over people who do not.
As a poet yourself, what living poet and what dead poet has had the most influence on your own life and work?
Only one. Among living poets, I'm trying to think of, who probably... Well, Richard Wilbur is the living poet I most admire. He's 95. He lives up in Massachusetts. A very great poet, a very great Christian poet. What I've learned from him has been largely indirect things because he's a happy poet and I'm a sad poet. Of the dead poets, Shakespeare is simply the greatest poet I've ever read. He's influenced me in any number of ways, but probably more immediately Robert Frost, W.H. Auden.
And among prose writers in the literary scene?
I'm always reading novels, rereading novels. Last year I reread Anna Karenina, and it is the greatest novel ever written. Tolstoy is probably the greatest fiction writer who ever lived. I also love Stendhal, I love Balzac. In Americans, I love Willa Cather, the one great novelist about happiness, Henry James, Flannery O'Connor, John Cheever.
Who would be the ideal guest at your dinner party?
I would like to have dinner with St. Thomas Aquinas because he's brilliant and he was a bon vivant. He was great, immensely overweight. He loved to eat. He loved to drink. He loved to talk. I think he'd be good company. Probably the only theologian I'd want to have, I think St. Augustine would probably be less good company. He wouldn't even give us an apple.
Why should the average American read poetry?
The reason you should read poetry is for pleasure. And the trouble with our culture is we've disconnected poetry from pleasure. But what poetry gives you is a pleasure that leads to wisdom. And if you dwell on that wisdom, it leads to transformation.
And final question. For the busy executive who doesn't read poetry but would be interested in starting, what guidance would you give?
I think anybody who wants to know about poetry but doesn't really know much, buy a good anthology, an older one. You can buy them very inexpensively, in paperback. Oscar Williams' Great Poems of the English Language, Untermeyer's Great Poets of England and America, and simply read one poem a day. At the end of a month, you'll have read 30 poems, and you'll actually start to really begin to understand the art. At the end of the year, you're going to be an expert.
We'll be hosting Dana tonight at the National Press Club to talk about why poetry matters. We hope you'll join us, and we'll also have footage from that conversation online at www.ttf.org.
And I hope I won't embarrass everyone.
Thanks for joining us.